The American Wild West: Origins, Development, and Legacy. Expanded Overview. Introduction. The American Wild West, often depicted as a vast, lawless, and adventurous frontier, encompasses a period from roughly the late 1860s through the early 20th century. This era arose from a combination of historical forces, geographic expansion, economic opportunity, cultural interaction, and political developments that reshaped the nation's identity and landscape. This expanded overview traces the origins of the Wild West, details its major phases and social dynamics, examines notable figures, and considers its enduring impact on both American consciousness and history. Origins, Manifest Destiny, and Territorial Expansion. The Wild West's inception is deeply rooted in the 19th century doctrine of manifest destiny, the belief that the United States was preordained to expand from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Manifest destiny gained momentum after the Louisiana Purchase, 1803, which doubled the nation's size and opened territories inhabited by Native American tribes and European colonial interests. Throughout the first half of the 1800s, explorers and settlers pushed westward, guided by expeditions like the Lewis and Clark Journey, 1804-1806, which mapped an eastern path to the Pacific and documented vast resources. The Mexican-American War, 1846-1848, and the resulting Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo expanded the U.S. further, adding lands rich in minerals and agricultural promise. The Homestead Act of 1862 was a landmark turning point by granting 160 acres of public land to settlers willing to cultivate and improve it. The act catalyzed migration, particularly of immigrants and displaced eastern populations, eager for land and opportunity. The federal government's policies actively encouraged settlement, claiming to civilize and develop the wilderness for American prosperity. The railroads and economic growth. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869 physically united the east and west coasts and revolutionized transportation, commerce, and migration. Railroads enabled vast quantities of goods, people, and raw materials to move across the continent with unprecedented speed and efficiency. Towns and cities emerged along rail lines, transforming once isolated regions into economic hubs. Railroads were economic engines, but also sources of monopolistic power and political influence. Companies like the Central Pacific and Union Pacific manipulated land grants and government subsidies while exploiting workers, many of whom were immigrant laborers, including Chinese immigrants who faced severe discrimination. The rail network unified markets, bolstered industries, and underpinned the rapid growth of cattle, ranching, mining, and farming sectors central to Western development. Native American displacement and conflict. The westward expansion brought inevitable conflict with indigenous peoples who had lived on the land for centuries. The Wild West was often the site of violent clashes as the U.S. military and settlers encroached on tribal territories. Wars such as the Sioux Wars, the Apache Wars, and the Nez Perce War exemplified determined native resistance. The infamous Battle of Little Bighorn, 1876, where General Custer's troops were decisively defeated by Sioux and Cheyenne warriors, punctuated this era of conflict. Federal policies, including the establishment of reservations under the Bureau of Indian Affairs and later the Dawes Act of 1887, sought to confine and assimilate native populations, undermining their traditional social structures and forcing allotment of communal lands to individuals. Though resistance continued, the cumulative effects left Native Americans marginalized. The conflicts reshaped the demographics and control of the West, forcing native peoples onto reservations and altering their ways of life. Mining booms and boomtowns. The discovery of precious metals spurred waves of migration and economic speculation. The California Gold Rush, 1848-1855, ignited mass movement westward, inspiring 49ers seeking wealth. Subsequent booms were triggered by finds such as the Comstock Lode in Nevada, rich in silver and gold, and mineral rushes in Colorado, South Dakota, and Montana. These rushes created boomtowns, rapidly constructed settlements that were often lawless, economically volatile, and culturally diverse. Boomtowns like Virginia City, Deadwood, and Tombstone became notorious for gambling, saloons, and violent disputes, embodying both opportunity and disorder. Despite their promise, many settlers faced harsh conditions, financial ruin, and the harsh reality of frontier life. Cattle ranching and the cowboy mythos. Cattle ranching emerged as a dominant economic activity on the open ranges of Texas, Kansas, Wyoming, and Montana. The booming demand for beef in eastern cities, coupled with expandable grazing lands, fueled large-scale ranching operations. Cowboys, iconic figures of the West, drove cattle herds over long distances to railheads, a central economic activity from the 1860s through the 1880s. Their lives, often romanticized in popular culture, were demanding and fraught with dangers, including weather, rustlers, and native conflicts. The introduction of barbed wire fencing in the 1870s transformed the West, ending the open range system and leading to conflicts between ranchers, farmers, and freedmen. This range war symbolized the clash of old and new ways of life in the West, lawlessness and frontier justice. The Wild West gained a legendary reputation for lawlessness and violence, though historical scholarship reveals significant variations. Many frontier towns had sheriffs, marshals, and courts, but limited resources and rapid population growth challenged law enforcement. Famous lawmen like Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, and Wild Bill Hickok became symbols of frontier justice, often embroiled in dramatic shootouts. Outlaws such as Jesse James, Billy the Kid, and the James Younger Gang captivated public imagination and embodied rebellion against authority. Gunfights, feuds, and vigilantism were common, reflecting the tenuous nature of social order, but also the cultural valorization of rugged individualism and self-reliance. Women of the Wild West, though frequently overlooked, women played diverse roles during this era. Figures such as Calamity Jane and Annie Oakley challenged gender norms through their frontier exploits. Women also managed homesteads, operated businesses, and contributed to community building. The image of the pioneer woman symbolized endurance and adaptability in harsh frontier conditions. Women's social organizations, schools, and churches became vital institutions in emerging communities, shaping social norms and civil life. The closing of the frontier and legacy. By the late 19th century, the frontier was closing. The 1890 U.S. Census declared the frontier line no longer identifiable, symbolizing the end of an era. Settlements, agriculture, fencing, and railroad expansion altered the open wilderness irrevocably. Federal policy, including the enforcement of reservations and assimilationist programs, ended most organized native resistance. The West became increasingly integrated into the national economy and political framework. The Wild West's legacy endures in American culture through literature, film, folklore, and collective memory. It represents the nation's complex narratives of freedom, opportunity, conflict, and identity. The social and cultural landscape of the American Wild West, an expanded analysis. The American Wild West was far more than a backdrop of rugged landscapes and frontier violence. It was a dynamic social and cultural arena where diverse populations interacted, identities were forged, and new ways of life emerged. Understanding the social and cultural complexity of this era reveals how the West shaped American values, challenged existing social norms, and created enduring myths. Diversity and demographic transformation. The Wild West population was incredibly diverse, reflecting waves of migration and settlement. Native American tribes with rich cultural traditions, including the Sioux, Cheyenne, Apache, and Navajo, were the original inhabitants, living off the land with complex social, political, and spiritual systems. The influx of European American settlers, African Americans, including formerly enslaved people seeking new opportunities, and immigrants from Ireland, Germany, Scandinavia, Italy, and Eastern Europe reshaped this demographic mosaic. Chinese immigrants played pivotal roles, especially in railroad construction and mining, though they faced harsh discrimination and legislative exclusion. Latino communities from the Southwest, descendants of Spanish colonial and Mexican populations, added further cultural layers. The cultural interactions among these groups ranged from conflict to cooperation. For example, trading posts often served as cultural meeting points, while interracial marriages, though rare, occurred in some communities. However, the colonization and settlement process often resulted in the suppression and marginalization of native cultures. Gender roles in women's experience, contrary to stereotypes of the Wild West, as a male-dominated realm of gunslingers and outlaws, women were central to frontier society. Pioneer women undertook physically demanding labor, maintaining farms and households in often lonely and harsh conditions. Women also established schools, churches, and social clubs that formed the backbone of community life. Figures like Calamity Jane challenged traditional gender norms, becoming legendary for their toughness and frontier skills. Other women, such as women homesteaders, teachers, and nurses, played critical roles in societal development. Women also participated in temperance and suffrage movements, early precursors to later feminist activism. Despite these contributions, social expectations rigidly constrained many women, emphasizing domestic roles amidst a harsh, often violent environment: law, order, and justice. The absence of established government institutions in many frontier areas led to unique approaches to law and justice. While vigilante groups and frontier courts attempted to maintain order, justice was uneven and often swift. The mythos of the gunfighter and lawman emerged from real struggles to impose order amid rapid social change. Societies experimented with innovative governance forms ranging from miners' assemblies to early town councils. These grassroots institutions reflected democratic aspirations, but were also susceptible to corruption and factionalism, economic and social mobility. The Wild West was often seen as a land of opportunity and social mobility. Many settlers pursued farming or ranching, took part in mining booms, or started businesses, believing they could escape the entrenched class structures of the East. However, social mobility was uneven. Wealth often concentrated with landowners, mine operators, and merchants, while laborers and settlers faced cycles of poverty and hardship. The precariousness of frontier life fostered a strong ethos of individualism, self-reliance, and entrepreneurial spirit that became idealized in American culture, mythology, media, and popular culture. The Wild West quickly transcended its historical realities to become a powerful cultural symbol. Traveling shows, dime novels, and newspapers popularized sensationalized stories of outlaws, lawmen, and dramatic gunfights. Buffalo Bill's Wild West show famously toured the country and Europe, shaping the world's image of the American frontier. This mythology promoted themes of courage, freedom, and rugged individualism, often overlooking the complexities of race, gender, and violence. Yet it profoundly influenced American identity and media genres, laying the foundation for Western films, literature, and television that persist today. Racial and social conflicts. The Wild West was rife with racial tensions. Native Americans were displaced and often violently suppressed. African Americans migrated west, some as free homesteaders, but faced discrimination and exclusion. Hispanic populations experienced ongoing marginalization, particularly after American annexation of Southwest territories. Social hierarchies and segregation emerged with distinct racial and ethnic lines marked by prejudice, violence, and exclusionary laws. These tensions illustrate the contradictions of a frontier myth promoting freedom amid stark inequalities. Conclusion. The social and cultural realities of the American Wild West were complex and multifaceted. It was an era of great hope, diversity, conflict, invention, and myth-making. The interactions between settlers, native peoples, immigrants, men, and women created a dynamic frontier society that helped define America's evolving identity. While romanticized in popular culture, the era's social fabric was marked by struggles over race, gender, justice, and opportunity that continue to resonate in the American experience. Do not use any stock media,